All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to go ahead and kick off this webinar. My name is Jordan Whala. I'm the CEO of Lead Simple, and today we're going to be talking about dominant follow-up strategies. These are critical sales techniques to drive results at your company. Joining me today is Janice Denham, the sales manager at All Property Management. All Property Management is actually our sponsor for today's webinar. And I'm just going to kick things off by asking Janice a couple of questions. Janice, the first thing I wanted to ask you is, how long has All Property Management been in business for? All right, looks like we've got a technical issue going on with Janice's microphones. We're going to go ahead and skip that.
Oh, there you go. Sorry, Jordan. I'm with you
Okay.
now.
Hey, all right, perfect. That sounds good. Janice, how long has All Property Management been around for?
We've been around for about 10 years, and just I want to thank you for involving us in this webinar. Converting leads is near and dear to our hearts. We've been doing it, providing leads for a long time, and so thanks for involving us. So yeah, we've been around about 10 years.
All right, sounds good. And how many property managers work with you guys?
We have about 2,500 property managers across the nation that are actively buying leads from us.
And why do they use All Property Management? Obviously, there's a number of options out there. What makes APM unique?
Yeah, so for those of you that don't know what we do, we provide owner leads for property managers. And I think what makes us unique really comes down to three things. We have a really simple, easy to use program. We have the best group of account reps in the industry, readily available to help you customize your program with us. And probably most importantly, we've always focused on one thing here at All Property Management, and that's connecting owners with property managers. And we've maintained a strong internet presence for over 10 years. So we get in front of a lot of owners and investors. Yesterday, I was with our marketing folks, and they told me there are over 700,000 ways owners find us on the internet. An amazing stat. So they know how to cast a wide net. So yeah, when it comes to marketing your organization, getting you in front of owners, we like to think you can delegate some of that heavy lifting to us and hopefully free up more of your time to focus on the business of property management.
Hey, that's fantastic and makes a ton of sense. Great service. All right, so guys, we're going to go ahead and just do some housekeeping stuff here on the front side. We are going to have some Q&A at the end of this webinar. You can submit questions either directly on the right-hand side of your screen. You should see a box that you can submit questions in. Alternatively, you could also submit questions via Twitter by using the hashtag #LeadSimple. So we're going to go ahead and kick things off by looking at the outline for today. We're going to be talking about 3 fundamental principles of sales success, and then we're going to move on to talking about specific follow-up tactics that you can use in your company. Before we do that, though, we're actually going to be looking at the 10,000-foot view, really high level, at some basic fundamental sales truths. And we're going to start off by kind of looking at the mother-all of sales realities, and that is the bulk of leads will always flow to the companies with the most efficient sales funnel. And at the office, what we like to call this is the virtuous cycle of conversion. And here's what this looks like in practice. The companies that are able to optimize and improve their conversion rate, they're able to close leads efficiently, will have a lower cost per contract. That lower cost per contract will translate into better profit margin. That increased profit margin will translate into more available money to go back into your marketing budget, which obviously drives more leads, and then the cycle starts over and over again. And the faster that you can get this cycle moving, the more times, the more powerful it actually is, the more power it generates. So this is another way to look at the same thing. This is a chart that is contrasting the cost per contract versus conversion rate. As you can see, you want to be down in the bottom right. The better you're able to convert leads, the lower your cost per contract is. It just makes dollars and cents. And the last thing we want to understand is that close rates drive lead costs. This is something a lot of people don't talk about, but this is a really important reality for any mature lead marketplace, whether or not you're talking about pay-per-click, SEO, all property management, wherever. Over time, competition grows, it increases. That competition drives innovation. That innovation drives better sales technique, better technology, etc. And what that means is that in aggregate, the market is moving forward and close rates are improving over time. But obviously, that's not evenly distributed. There are some laggards and there are some companies that are on the bleeding edge. Those companies that are on the bleeding edge, as they're improving their close rate, as we mentioned previously, end up having a lower cost per contract. So what do they do with that? Well, most of those companies don't pocket those profits that they're able to take off the table. Instead, it gets reinvested back into their marketing and advertising efforts. And so the byproduct of that is that that's what drives up your cost per click, your cost per lead, etc. So for those closers, for those companies that perform well in closing leads, they are able to basically maintain a static cost per contract as they are getting better, reinvesting those profits. And so what that means is the companies that are not keeping up and that are not improving their close rate will inevitably experience higher and higher both cost per click, cost per lead, as well as an ultimate overall increase in their cost per contract. So you can see this expressed, for example, in AdWords. This is a 2-year view of looking at AdWord costs over time. It trends up and to the right. Again, this is a basic economic principle. It's that this exists and is exhibited in any mature lead marketplace where saturation and competition take place over time. Bottom line, your success and survival depend on your ability to establish and maintain a high close rate. It's not a luxury, it's a necessity. So we're going to move on to talking about those 3 fundamental concepts that I mentioned earlier. And the first of those is focusing on the top of the funnel. Here's what I mean by that. This is your average sales funnel. Every lead that you receive goes through a basic process. They start off as new. You make initial contact. You try and schedule a meeting. You try and complete the meeting. You get some kind of a verbal commitment, and then you end up with a signed contract. But here's the thing. Most management companies tend to focus lower down in the funnel, in that meeting completed, verbal commitment type stage. And what I mean by that is, oftentimes the refrain that you'll hear is, man, if I can just get in front of the prospect, if I can just meet them at their property, I can close them. Well, that's great, but it's not a huge testimony to your ability to sell. The reality is anybody working with a highly motivated seller is going to be able to facilitate that transaction. Where there is room for improvement, where there's room to optimize is up at the top of the funnel. So I'm talking about getting in touch with a higher percentage of the leads that you get and scheduling more meetings with those individuals. Those steps tend to be more neglected because people view the people that fall out in those early stages as being more casual buyers. That's not necessarily the case. So the point is, we want to focus on working on the top of the funnel. And if we do that, here's what that looks like. If we were to focus on improving our contact rate and our meeting schedule rate by 20%, that benefit would translate down to an overall 40% improvement in our overall close rate. So that's 40% improved sales, 40% greater revenue. That's a big deal. So the question here is, are you a salesperson or are you an order taker? A salesperson has a specific methodology, builds rapport, and works to overcome objections. An order taker is really just there to facilitate paperwork. You know, they say the pessimist says the glass is half empty, the optimist says the glass is half full, while the salesperson says, let's talk about the benefits of ice. Sales is an art. It's part science, it's part art, and if you don't identify with either of those things, then you have to ask the question, are you the best person to be dealing with those prospects? And that's not any kind of a slam, but the reality is there should be an appropriate division of labor within your company, and the most qualified person to be able to manage prospects should be taking those calls and trying to close leads. So the second thing here, second fundamental principle is that persistence pays off. This is what we would call the progression of a sale. It basically shows the prospect, the process, both from the perspective of the salesperson as well as the prospect, that people go through in order from going from prospect to customer. What you're seeing on the top of this chart at contact 1, contact 2, contact 3 is the attrition of salespeople falling off over time. So basically, I made that first outbound touch, I made the second outbound touch, and if I wasn't able to get a hold of somebody in the first 1, 2, or 3 times, a lot of salespeople tend to give up. Bottom line is that a salesperson's patience oftentimes is less than the prospect. From the prospect's perspective, the prospect could have a lot of things going on. They could have a longer term timeline. They're over time getting to know you, your company, your services, building rapport, building trust, and you're over time establishing mind share with this individual, whether or not they're ready to buy now or they're ready to buy over time. The more interaction that you're having with this person, the more buy-in you're establishing. So another way to look at this is what we call a contact probability arc. This is a chart showing the correlation between the number of call attempts made and the likelihood of getting somebody on the phone. So as you can see, every additional attempt you make improves your odd of actually getting in touch with that prospect. The problem is that at the same time, what's falling is the odds of a sales agent continuing to stay in touch with the prospect. So these are the two things that are in tension, and that delta, that gap in the middle, that's what creates opportunity for companies that are willing to be aggressive. So the question here is, how many calls do you make before giving up? We ran a poll at the registration of this webinar, and we asked, how many times do you call a lead that isn't returning your calls? We don't know why they're not returning your calls. Could be a million different reasons, but the bottom line is, how many times will you follow up? And these were what the results look like. So as you can see, the vast majority of people said 3 times, and it's more or less even between the percentage of people that are saying twice or 4 times or more. So this is kind of middle of the road. These results that are self-reported are actually higher than the industry stats that the hard data that we see when we've actually tracked this stuff. But nonetheless, this is what people are projecting. All in all, on average, it averages out to about 3 contact attempts. So you can see what that looks like here. Over time, agents' willingness to follow up is diminishing. It's about what you would expect. So the third fundamental principle is that leads are people. You're a person, I'm a person. That lead in your funnel, they're a person too. You can see here some great data that's very straightforward in communicating about buying timelines and where prospects are at. On the left-hand side, 50% of leads are qualified but not ready to buy. And everybody can relate to this. You're looking at a product or service and you're interested, but your timeline isn't right now. The fact that you're not willing to convert within the next 1 or 2 weeks, that doesn't mean that you don't have legitimate buying intent, but your timeline is longer. On the right-hand side, 50% of sales happen after the 5th touch. Again, going back to this idea that it takes time to actually work people to the point of getting ready to actually make the close. So the sale doesn't happen in the 1st or 2nd call most of the time. And lastly, companies that excel at lead nurturing generate 50% more sales at 33% lower cost. This is huge. So all in all, what are we talking about here? What we're saying is that the focus should be on treating your leads in the same way that you would want to be treated. As the prospect, how will I be treated when I enter your sales funnel? Will you respect my time, my intellect, my financial goals? Will you create value for me before I decide to buy? Question here is, are you building or burning your long-term lead database? There is nothing that makes me tear up like the thought of people getting leads and then dumping them if they don't convert within the first few weeks. As you receive leads, and every time that you receive a lead, you are improving and growing your overall database. And this is really a sacred asset for your company. When you think about the assets inside of your organization, you think about human capital, you think about infrastructure, etc. Your lead list, that's absolutely a part of that equation. It's something that should be preserved and stewarded over time. Because again, the reality is prospects go through the common cycle of hiring somebody, and then eventually there's churn 1 year, 2 years down the road. Staying in front of people is how you're able to actually extract massive value from your database over time. All right, so we're going to go ahead and move into the 10 follow-up tactics guaranteed to work for your company. These are specific, actionable things that you can start doing today to drive results in your organization. So let's go ahead and dive in. The first is get there first. Everybody knows that being fast, responding quickly is important. That's a good kind of obvious overall principle. Now, how quickly is debatable, right? Some people think that a half hour is fast. Some people think an hour is fast. For other people, anytime within the first 24 hours after a lead came in is a quick response time. But in general, people get that speed matters. What less people understand is that being first is what really matters. Being first, being the first guy to set expectations, frame the conversation, build rapport, and to have everybody else after you competing in lieu of the mental framework that you've already established with that prospect. So this is something that has a big impact and it costs you nothing to change. That's why up at the top of the list. And there are some really practical reasons why speed matters, just some obvious stuff. Point number one, presence. When that prospect submits that lead, submits that contact inquiry, they're likely sitting at their computer with the phone nearby and they're available. Second off, engagement. The prospect hits submit, they're thinking about their problem, they're mentally engaged with that issue and they want to talk about it now. Will that be the case in a half hour, in 6 hours? No idea, but it is the case now and for the next, I don't know, let's say at least 120 seconds. Third point, rapport. Fast responses build confidence and rapport that you're starting things off on the right foot and that you're going to continue to deliver that after the fact. Everybody knows that this is the Cinderella moment, right? When the clock strikes 12, maybe you're going to turn into a pumpkin. But for at least that first phone call, second phone call, etc., you're putting on your best face forward. And if your best foot forward involves responding after 48 hours, that sets some pretty poor expectations. Fourth, first mover advantage. I mentioned it before. First to contact, first to frame the conversation, and get a shot to closing the deal. Second tactic, use a follow-up schedule. What do I mean by that? I mean, when a lead comes in, you should have a clear and coherent expectation for how it will be dealt with. We're going to start off looking short term. We're going to zoom into that first 30 minutes after a new lead arrives. Here's a potential schedule. Is this canonical? No. Can you do different things, have a different schedule, and have great success? Yes. Do you need to have something that predefines who, what, why, and when leads are responded to? Absolutely. In this example, when a new lead comes in, at the 5-minute mark, we're asking, was this lead called? If the answer is no, we want to notify some kind of a manager. You may be a single person mom and pop operator, it may not apply, but this is what we want to work towards, is having accountability in the sales process. If at that 5-minute mark, the lead has been called by that time, 5 minutes after the lead came in, well, then the question is, did they answer? If they did answer, then obviously you're trying to schedule that meeting. You're trying to do everything you can to qualify, ask relevant questions, get a meeting scheduled. If they did not answer, then we wait till the 30-minute mark and we provide a follow-up phone call. So this is the second phone call. And again, the question there is, at the 30-minute mark, have they been called? If they did pick up, again, we're trying to schedule that meeting. If not, we want to move off towards leaving a voicemail, sending a follow-up email, and scheduling a follow-up reminder task. So we want to wait to leave that voicemail and to send out that email until we've already made those first initial 2 touches. There's some really good research that shows why it's important to lead off with the phone call as opposed to the email. But one of the most obvious things is that sending out that email provides a false sense of confidence that you've actually done something and reached out to the prospect. Maybe they did or didn't get your email, did or didn't read it. If you call, you're going to get some kind of a result on the other end of the phone. The other thing that I didn't mention here is that at the 30-minute mark, if this lead has still not been called, that lead should be reassigned to a different agent within the company. Again, people are tied up, they could be busy, a million different reasons, but at the end of the day, the prospect doesn't care. So if somebody isn't responding to a lead assigned to them within 30 minutes, hand it off to somebody else in the company. Looking a little longer term. This is a longer term follow-up schedule. This is an 11-touch, 22-day model. This is based on some research advocated by Velocify.com. Good folks. This schedule is basically looking at longer term, those first 22 days, what should we be doing? On day 1, going from left to right, call within the first minute, email after 20 minutes, call again between 30 and 60 minutes, and place a third call within 1 to 2 hours. It may feel like a bit much. It may feel heavy-handed. You can modify as you see fit, but yes, we are trying to be aggressive here. On day 4, we're sending up another follow-up email. On day 5, follow-up phone call. Day 8, 14, 15, 22, you get it. You see where I'm going with this. Have structure, have an expectation, communicate something authority where you're able to say, this is what works, this is the expectation of what I want done, and then measure against that. If there is no expectation, there cannot be any kind of failure. Third point, track actual contact attempts. You know, there's an interesting phenomenon in this industry. If you ask folks what their conversion rate is, or how quickly they respond to leads, or how many times they follow up, most people really don't hesitate to give you an answer. But if you say, show me, if you ask for specific data, oftentimes it's crickets, because most people don't track these things. What I'm talking about here is the motivation predicated upon the fact that people respect what you inspect. Again, when you have an expectation and you say, this is what's important, and you communicate it up front, people are going to respond accordingly. So here's a practical way to actually implement this. Folks, I want to encourage you to use a lead management system that allows you to actually track your contacts attempts by using tracked contact information. And here's what I mean by that. On the left-hand side, we have the original contact information. Every time you get a new lead, they've got a phone number, they've got an email address. What we want to find is a system that will allow you to mask and wrap that contact information in tracked contact information. So when I dial the number on the right, it rings the number on the left. When I email the email address on the right, it gets sent to the email address on the left. What's the point here? What are we trying to accomplish? The point is that if you use a lead management system that has tracked contact information, you have completely changed the paradigm of sales accountability. You no longer need to go in and ask how people are following up. You don't need to look over anybody's shoulder, and you don't have to place a burden on your agents of actually going in and litigiously taking notes after the fact, which is a great idea, but oftentimes not that realistic. By using tracked contact information, even if your agent never logs into the system, you're able to capture every call and email that's actually made. And here's what that looks like in practice. For an individual lead, I should be able to see every single call and email. Who made it? When did it happen? How long did it last for? Can I hopefully listen to in on that call? Can I read the contents of that email? All of that information should be accessible to you. We're in an era where this is a basic expectation for monitoring sales performance. This is what it looks like to be engaged with sales in your company. Fourth point, leverage email templates. And this is a big one. Here's what I'm talking about when I say an email template. I'm talking about that email that you send out right after a new lead comes in. I'm talking about that email that you sent out on day 3 when you still haven't heard from them. The same email or the similar email that you send out on day 7 trying to get in touch with this prospect. I'm talking about that email that you sent out after you've confirmed a meeting and now you're trying to send the itinerary to the prospect, or a meeting reminder right before the meeting. All of these things are common repetitive activities. And at the end of the day, agents know what they need to do, but people get busy. These email templates lower the amount of work necessary to get the job done. And more importantly than that, they lower the amount of thinking. They lower the cognitive barrier. There's a hard reality about context switching when you're juggling a lot of different things, wearing multiple hats, and you're not just focused on one specific task. There's a little bit of a barrier to jump into your sales tasks. So this basically is building a positive path of least resistance to do the right thing. This is basic habit formation 101. This is also a great way to add leverage to your sales model. And you should always be looking for leverage in your business. Invest in great templates up front. Refine them over time. Refine them based on feedback. Refine from the prospect. Refine them based on feedback from your agents. This is a huge asset, and it's a huge quality control win. And this is how you give your team the tools to succeed. You want to equip your people before you send them out in the field. They're going to thank you for it. Point number 5, tracking email opens. Every time that you send out an email to a prospect, you don't necessarily know what's happened. If you had a phone call, like I said before, somebody picked up or didn't pick up, you're leaving a voicemail, etc., you know if you got through or not. With emails, oftentimes it's a little bit of a black box, it's a little bit of a vortex. We want to change that paradigm as much as possible. And here's a great use case. You've had a good initial conversation with the prospect, and then they went dark for whatever reason. 7 days in, 14 days in, you've sent out a couple emails, you haven't heard anything. Well, what do you do at that time? If you're like most property managers, you tend to get pretty pessimistic about the odds of this actually going anywhere. But what if you saw that that person that you sent the emails to had opened both emails multiple times and clicked through on those links that you included in your email to read more about your company? Wouldn't that change the paradigm of what you're thinking about the viability of this prospect? It sure would. Here's what this looks like. Again, there's different systems that offer this. Lead Simple is one of them, but this is what it looks like. Can I see when did this person open my email? Are they actually still engaged with the content that I am sending them? Point number 5, time your follow-up attempts. And this is another big one. So there's some great research regarding the best day to call. What day of the week is the best time to actually get in touch with a given prospect? And on the flip side of that, what is the best time to get in touch with a prospect? And both of these things vary by format. So although it trends along a similar line, the response rate that you're going to see via getting in touch with somebody via email is going to be different than getting in touch with that person via phone. So the point here is, you should have in your mental paradigm kind of a framework of when your ideal time is to message long-term prospects. For short-term prospects, you're responding quickly, whatever that is. If that's Monday, Friday, it doesn't really matter. Particularly for your longer-term prospects, though, these people that you're nurturing, that you've had in your database for 3 or 4 months, those are the folks where you have the luxury of actually being laser precise about when you try and target those folks, and you can and should do that. Next, step number 7 is get agreement on next steps. Every single time that you are meeting with the prospect, that meeting should not end before establishing when the next meeting is going to happen. In the same way, when you're on the phone, that phone call should not end before you have gotten permission to follow up, either to follow up to do something significant like sending a contract, or establishing agreement to follow up in 3 months down the road because they kind of blew you off and said they're not really quite ready, call me back in 3 months. Folks, get permission. Operate inside of the zone of consent. Respect this person's time. Expect them to respect your time. So have some established parameters. So when you call them back, in the back of their time, in the back of their mind, they remember they said, sure, yeah, go ahead and call me. Or alternatively, qualify this person. If this person really is a tire kicker, they're not motivated, they don't want to talk to you, find that out now. Don't don't add to the volume of your task list meaningless tasks about following up with people that don't really want to hear from you. So if somebody is going to give you an emphatic no, stop contacting them. Find out sooner rather than later. Point number 8, we want to change up the ways in which you reach out to prospects. Over time, habits change, and the means of communication that people use are changing. There are some common examples of that, right? The internet. People communicate in ways that they didn't not only 10 years ago, but 1 year ago. So what I'm not advocating here is using something like Snapchat to get in touch with your prospects. What I am talking about is being aware of the fact that response rates vary by format. So for example, the response rate and the open rate that you can expect from email is going to be different than what you can expect from a text message, which is going to be different than the response rate or the level of engagement that you could expect from communicating with somebody via some kind of a social platform. Obviously, context matters. Context is what's driving the choice of medium made here. But be cognizant of that. And blow away the device. Blow away digital. Send somebody a mailer. Drip on somebody via a nice brochure after 6 months. But change it up. Think beyond the scope of just merely an email and phone call paradigm. Point number 9, add value before the sale. Think about your own buying habits. Think about that product that you were looking at on Amazon.com or wherever. You did some research up front. You wanted to find out context, pricing, comparative values, etc. This whole notion of being an educated consumer is something that we can't stop. It's coming. It is what it is. So the question is, who is going to educate the consumer? Is it going to be you, or is it going to be one of your competitors? Is your brand a resource and an information asset, or merely a vendor? Do owners look to you when they have questions, not just when they're ready to hire you? You want to get into the funnel. You want to address people in the sales funnel as early as possible, because when you do it early, you become the person that they're looking to long term, and you're the one that's sticking in their mind. And this is just common sense, guys. If you're dealing with a vendor, what would you rather see? Would you rather get handed a plain black and white management agreement with a yes or no proposition? Would you like to buy? Yes or no? Or would you rather be massaged with content and resources that are engaging, interesting, and stick in your mind, etc.? And guys, I'm not talking about vanity here. People are busy, and things like design are a helpful signal about the quality of your company. We live in the 21st century, and it's reasonable for owners to look at your marketing and from that infer quite a bit about the quality of your organization. So obviously this requires taking a longer term view of the business and taking a longer term view of the sales cycle. But does that pay off? Absolutely. Invest up front, even if you can't explicitly track ROI. Last thing, use a call down list to follow up. This is kind of a helpful tip that a lot of people are not familiar with. When you think about, again, the things that you can do to grease the skids and incentivize the kind of sales behaviors that you would like to see, including, for example, following up with long-term prospects. One of the things that you can do that is by making it really easy to batch that task. Batching is really powerful in a number of different applications, but specifically as it applies to following up with your long-term prospects, these people that have been in your database for 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, a year, etc. What can we do to make it easier to follow up with those people? Because we do need some kind of an incentive, right? Already, most agents are starting off with a very pessimistic, low expectation of the yield and the ROI that they're going to get from making follow up with those longer term prospects. So what we want to do to even that out is by lowering the work involved. A call down list is a great way to do that. And here's what that looked like. In your lead management system that you're using to manage your sales process, you should have the ability to filter your leads so as to only be looking at the subset of leads that you're actively nurturing, and then to just list those people alphabetically by last time that you called them and by the number of calls and emails made. So you can strategically filter your list and say, okay, I want to look at my prospects that are between 3 and 12 years old that have received less than 2 phone calls and haven't been touched in at least 3 months. Okay, boom, here's a list of 50 prospects. Now you should be able to click from prospect to prospect to prospect without having a lot of hassle involved to be able to automatically call these folks. Again, this is something that lead management, that Lead Simple does for our clients, but at the end of the day, find any system, build your own if you want to, but this is where you're going to get more leverage in your prospects. So you may be thinking to yourself, all right, we've gone through 10 points, 1 through 10. I saw nothing about drip. What about drip? Drip, drip, drip. I get asked this all the time. Hey, here's my take on this. Drip email, and by the way, what I'm referring to there is having automatic emails sent out to prospects. Drip is great. We're a fan of it here at the office. It's something that we employ, but there's a couple of caveats. Number one, drip is, it's advanced. It takes time. This is essentially the equivalent of choosing to hunt with a bow and arrow versus a handgun versus a machine gun. Now, objectively, is hunting with a machine gun more likely to kill your target prey? Yes. But, if you're taking your 14-year-old grandson hunting, is it a good idea to hand him that fully automatic machine gun? Probably not. It takes more training, more intentionality, and so it's something that you work up to. And the concern that I have is that people tend to get shiny object syndrome with drip. People want to jump straight to that when they already have a broken process. If you're not willing to call leads promptly, if you're not willing to consistently following to actively manage and measure your sales, and you think that some kind of a drip whiz-bang system that's automatically going to do all the work for you is going to work, I'm sorry to disappoint you, but that's an entirely failed assumption. And just as a practical example to show you what could go wrong with drip, again, acknowledging that I like it, but it takes effort to get there. It's not where I would start. In a couple months, we're going to have a webinar focusing specifically here. But just to illustrate what can go wrong, here's an example of old school drip, right? This is a letter that was sent out by United Airlines to one of their customers that had a negative experience with the airline. So the format of the format difference between sending out a template letter in the mail versus a template email is pretty much identical. You have a pre-baked email with some inserts of where you should be entering the specifics of this person's name, etc. And you can imagine this is embarrassing. This is not representing your brand well. In this instance, United had an angry customer and they respond with some form email that completely acknowledges that they've taken no time to understand what they did wrong or to even address the needs of this individual. So this company, United, obviously ends up looking pretty ignorant in this example. So this is the kind of stuff that can go wrong if you're not really on top of it and managing it. But I digress. Again, love drip. We're going to have another webinar in a couple months talking more about how to employ that. Those are just the cautions I would put out there as you're thinking about how that meshes with your overall big picture sales process. So like I mentioned, we are going to be having another webinar about that. We're having webinars about a lot of different stuff. We have a monthly webinar, second Thursday of each month. You can view the events schedule at webinar.leadsimple.com. And I just want to remind you that you can go ahead and submit questions either via the right-hand portion of your screen or via the Twitter hashtag #LeadSimple. So next webinar that we have coming up is First to Call, First to Close, the Science of Responding Faster. Why being fast isn't good enough and how to guarantee that you come in first. I'm excited about this. We're actually going to be looking at some really interesting research data that we were able to compile together from a big survey that we did. So there should be some pretty compelling information here. Hopefully you're able to join us for that next month. Last thing I want to review, the Smart Property Manager sales course is something that we just released. It covers the big picture of sales. We've just looked at one slice of that, which is follow-up. There's a number of different components to good sales. A lot of the information that we've covered here is expanded upon in this course. This course is free. It covers, I think it's 10 weeks of information that is sent out via email. So go check that out. Go to leadsimple.com/sales-course. We've got some great information there that we'd love you to be able to check out. All right, so I'm looking for questions here. It looks like we don't have any questions coming in at the moment. So I'm going to go ahead and gloss over this for now. If you do have questions within the next 30 seconds or so, feel free to submit those. Otherwise, we're just going to go ahead and move on for now. Last thing I want to mention on the call, guys, we are offering 10% off of a LeadSimple subscription for all property management customers. To get that, you're going to use the code APM109, that's APM109, and you can sign up at leadsimple.com/signup. Guys, we are so grateful that you have joined us today for this webinar. Hopefully you got something useful out of it. Hopefully you got something you can apply to your sales process. Here's to your sales success. My name is Jordan Muela. Thanks so much. Have a great day. Bye-bye.